Welcome to the FNO InsureTech Podcast, your home for all things InsureTech. Here are your hosts, Lee Boyd, Rob Beller, and David Prejeant.
Hey, podcast world. Welcome to this week's fabulous edition of FNO InsureTech. I am Rob Beller, one of your many co-hosts that we now have on our program. Actually, we have three, because some of us are so busy with what we do in life, we needed to add a third host, which you, if you're an audience member, you already know all this. If this is the first time you've heard us, well, there you go. There's three of us. With me today is David Prejeant. David, how you doing?
Good, Rob. How are you doing today? I know that you're coming to us from sunny California. Super excited. You guys are a lot more important and busy than I am, but I'm trying to level up my importance level. And this is just the first step. So I appreciate you guys letting me into your podcast world.
Well, I want you to know that I'm neither more important or busier than you. So that's just an illusion. But I will tell you what I'm very excited about.
What's that, Rob?
That you're asking me. I want you to ask me. And
yeah, tell me, Rob, what are you excited about?
I'm going to a baseball game. I'm a huge baseball fan. I've always been a baseball fan all my life. And for those of you who have lived in a cave, there is a baseball player today from Japan, Shohei Ohtani, who is arguably one of the greatest baseball players ever to play the game.
If not the greatest of, at least the greatest of maybe this generation, I think we can say. We can say that, right?
Yeah, baseball, you'll always get an argument, but we're talking Ruthian here. And in Sacramento, where I live, they play Major League Baseball for a few years. And it's a long story, make a long story short. There's a Major League Baseball team here, the A's, and they have in for 3 games starting tonight, the Los Angeles Dodgers. And
Dodgers, okay.
That includes Ohtani because he plays for
the one and only.
So I'm going tonight. I'm going to the game tonight to see him play.
I'm slightly jealous of that. I have never been to the A's game or an A's game.
You should be jealous. Tonight he will be hitting. He'll be playing DH, the DH position tonight. And then on Wednesday I'm going to go again and I'm going to see him pitch because
I'm going to say he's probably. That makes sense. You got to see both. I mean, if you're going to, there's no reason I'm not going to age anyone or try to put a number on anybody, but I don't know that I don't think that I will see another baseball player of this caliber in my lifetime. I don't think it's going to happen.
He's comparable to Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth pitched and hit and of course played the outfield later, but it is a remarkable feat. And so I want to go because I want to be able to tell my children and my children's children that I saw Shohei Ohtani play during his playing days. Because, of course, as we know, they don't go on forever. And
true.
And so anyway, so that's what I'm doing tonight. And I'm very excited. So after that very long introduction to my life, I'm going to say, what are we doing here anyways?
Well, Rob, I'm now glad that you asked. We are going into another fantastic edition of the FNO InsureTech Podcast.
Fabulous.
I was given the opportunity to fly solo on a recent interview.
You're a lucky guy to go solo.
I know. I got the privilege of speaking with Kat Gordienko, the CEO and co-founder of Builty. She is doing some really fascinating work in the, normally these two things don't go together. Fascinating and building permits. Not two things that you would normally put together, but I just did it.
No.
I have a bit of a contracting background, so I am familiar with the building permit process. I'm familiar with what a permit looks like and does and says. And the idea that her company is ingesting this data, and I use the word data very loosely, because if you've ever seen a building permit, data is not necessarily what you'd call it, but the fact that they're ingesting this data, trying to normalize it and putting it to good use in claims and underwriting scenarios, I think is super interesting. She did some time at Netflix, which we briefly touch on. we're going to briefly touch on today. And this isn't a spoiler. This is to keep you engaged. We got to hear about some of the most interesting building permits she's come across. Stick around for that. It's a lot of fun.
Sure.
Rob wants to hear it now. I can tell by the look on his face. Now he's interested.
Well, just give me a little preview.
Give you a little preview? Sure.
In one.
I actually talked to a contractor today. We have got a couple of small children and we also have some animals in the house. We have 2 cats, and she brought me up to speed on a new trend called catios, which are patios built and designed specifically for one's cat. So
please stop right there, because we have 2 cats and my wife is a crazy cat lady. And I can't, we're going to have to edit that out, because if she hears it,
next time I see her, I'm telling her next time.
if she hears it, we'll be pulling a permit real soon for a cat.
Yep, that's it. Well, guys, strap in.
So without further ado,
here comes Kat Gordienko, CEO and co-founder of Builty. Hello, podcast world. Welcome to FNO InsureTech. I am your solo host today, David Prejeant, here with an amazing guest, Kat Gordienko with Builty. How are you today?
Hi, David. I'm doing great, and thank you so much for having me.
Where are you located?
We are over in San Francisco Bay Area in the East Bay.
Is that where you're coming from today?
That I'm dialing it from Walnut Creek, California.
Okay, awesome. So, Kat, Builty has got an interesting story. You guys obviously are joining us today on an InsureTech podcast. So we're going to assume that you guys are in the InsureTech space. Tell us a little bit about Kat's origin story and how that weaves into the origin story of the company.
Yeah, thank you. We are in InsureTech indeed. And that's not how the story started. I come from the world of data analytics, data engineering. I was working for big tech in Silicon Valley. I was at Netflix analyzing streaming data and viewing patterns. And then COVID hit. So as a side project, I decided that I wanted to build an accessory dwelling unit on my property. And in California, ADUs are a big thing, especially over the past 5 years or so. So I filed building permits with my local jurisdiction as an owner builder. And then they kept asking for more information. There were a lot of back and forth. And then as the project was ongoing, the inspectors would come in and sign off, and all this data was getting recorded on my permit record. So I was curious where this data is actually being used, because naturally, I come from the data world. I'm very curious how the data is being applied. And then I just realized that this type of data is publicly available. So anybody in the city of Walnut Creek, if they know my address, they can look up my permit history for my home. But also I can do the same for anybody else, building in Walnut Creek. So I was curious who else is doing similar projects to mine in the surrounding area. And I basically analyzed permit records of the Walnut Creek jurisdiction to see who else is building ADUs, the timelines, the cost, am I over or under? How am I compared to the rest of the population? And it was just a fun side project. I got on a few Facebook user groups, ADU enthusiasts, and posted some of the information. And people started asking for it from everywhere, from California, the Bay Area, like San Jose and South Bay, but then from Los Angeles, San Diego, and then essentially all over the country, like Austin and other areas where ADUs become popular. So that was one kind of indication of an interesting use case. But then a few years later down the road, it didn't even dawn on me that I needed to change my insurance coverage. And thankfully, no adverse events happened on my property. But if they did, I wouldn't have been covered, because this change and this upgrade was kind of not registered anywhere. So I had to call my insurance company and update the coverage. And I was wondering, well, if this information is out there, out in the open, how come my insurance company didn't know as soon as I even filed a permit? My project was not even underway yet. So it would have been nice to know, how this change would affect my policy, what I should be aware of, even before I started. And as I started digging, I realized that, yes, this data is widely available. It's out in the open. And yet it's so unstructured and so disjointed from city to city because permit data exists at the city level that it's really hard to analyze and understand. And that's how the company started. I went from analyzing streaming data to analyzing building permits. And that was 5 years ago. We are at it more than ever. And that's how Builty began.
That's super interesting. I'm gonna put a pin in that Netflix thing because we might circle back to that.
Okay.
But I don't know how many building permit departments there are, 20,000, 30,000. I'm sure there's a ton of them. What does it look like when you start? I can only imagine, coming from someplace like Netflix. Netflix probably has a pretty standard data cycle, right? That's coming into them. I have a construction background. I have been a licensed home builder. I have been an insurance adjuster. I've been in the industry for a long time. And I've been in permit offices and I've seen building permits.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine the things that you guys started finding when you started digging into that. What did that look like? What was that process like? I mean, it couldn't have been like milk and cookies, sing-songy. How did that work?
Yes. Well, I guess from the data standpoint and data processing, not very different from Netflix. Yeah, it's a different nature of the data itself and different language or different abbreviations and so forth in terms. But from the data processing standpoint, it's just unstructured data. In fact, my co-founder also is not from insurance or real estate background. His background is in biotech. And when he came on board, he was like, oh, how hard can this be? I've been dealing with chemistry data and it's unstructured. And he thought it would be easier. And in fact, it's actually much harder. We keep joking that the language of permits is not natural language because there's so many terms and industry lingo that even existing LLMs get confused to this day. And there are some abbreviations that city decide to just make up. For example, there's WTF. It turns out that it stands for Wireless Transmission Facility. Who would know?
You made me a little nervous just then. You're gonna spike our rating there.
Yes, and things like that we keep uncovering. Another kind of interesting fact, ADUs. That's where it started. We uncovered that there are 200 synonyms to the word ADU. My favorite ones are Ohana units in Hawaii. There's coach house or carriage house in the Midwest, accessory apartments, in-law suites, backyard cottage, guest house, you name it. And as we add new jurisdiction one by one, we keep uncovering more and more things. And you're right on the number of jurisdictions. There's 20,000 across the country. And that's just at the local level. So there are some like federal and statewide jurisdictions, but we're only talking about like local building permits.
So you guys got in there, you started to get under the hood of insurance and found that it wasn't quite as straightforward as everyone may think it is. How did you guys, is there like, I've been in the industry and I still don't understand it all the time. So I completely get where you're coming from. How do you get up to speed on an industry like that you're just stepping into? Is there like what was it? Insurance for Dummies? Is that the book?
I'm sure there is one, if there is one. And yes, just getting up to speed on the terms, like how the industry is structured and, claims underwriting, distribution and the top carriers versus regional carriers versus, specialty. It's not an easy, I think it's a pretty steep slope to get on. So as a company, we just graduated from Creative Destruction Labs program in the risk cohort. And that was our way to get up to speed on insurance in general, because neither myself nor my co-founder have insurance background, and open up the doors to so many carriers to get their feedback, pressure test our assumptions, and understand what's lacking in the market. And we realized that even if we clean permit data and it's very clean and easy to understand, it's still not very usable to the end user. So as a result, we built out a suite of risk scores to kind of bridge that gap between raw data and end user application. And these risk scores are based on permit data alone, and they can tell a lot of different interesting things about a property that's dynamic and constantly changing.
Okay, that was going to be part of my next question is where does this, we've got all the data, we've cleaned it all up, we made it nice and shiny. How do we then, or how does Builty then go in and say, hey, here's this data. We want you to have it, and this is what we think it'll be good for. And do you think that when you started meeting with the carriers that there was anything unexpected that they said, or what did that look like for you guys?
Sure. When we first started, I think my original theory or hypothesis was, this permit data is going to be most useful for personal lines. I still think it is the case, and yet I feel like a lot of processes in personal lines are pretty standardized. So high volume and some standard workflows. And we uncovered by talking to carriers that even larger gaps exist in small and medium commercial property business lines. And for example, it's really hard to know information on fire sprinklers in the buildings. And turns out that there isn't a database that kind of has all the fire sprinklered commercial buildings registered, not just whether a building has fire sprinklers or not, but what type, what is the coverage, is it the entire space or partial, where the sprinklers are located and so forth. And this data is available in permits. It could be very hidden, so one would need to look for it, but that's something that we have built out by request from customers. So we have this fire protection score, for example, and yes, it accounts for presence of fire sprinklers and also fire doors, any other like fire mitigation actions that were performed on a property. Yes, we're uncovering that a lot of things are still very much unknown. There's been a lot of pretty amazing advances with aerial imagery and identifying like roof condition and maybe roof age, what's happening with the envelope of the building on the outside. But you still don't know anything about electrical, plumbing, mechanical, major systems, from just the photos themselves. A lot of times I hear that if those are unknown, like what is the age of the major systems, by default, the applicants can put 10 years just to kind of move on with the quoting process and get the job done. So we come in and look at permit data and identify what the actual age is.
That makes so much sense. We talked with some folks that were doing exactly that. They're using their technology to look at roofs and look at the sides of the building and all that stuff, but nobody's really pulling back that curtain and kind of looking at the guts of the house to say, hey, they probably still got knob and tube wiring in there, and that risk from an underwriting perspective looks a whole lot different than a risk that has had a breaker box installed 5 years ago. It's a totally different conversation. With your tech, how are you guys when you normalize that data? What does that look like? Or do you have like a proprietary AI agent? How are you guys taking that data and ingesting it and then cleaning it? What does that process look like for you guys to get the data to a point where you can bring it to a carrier and say, here's what we have?
Sure. So we started building out our custom language models before the entire AI hype. And when that happened, it sped up our processes by an incredible amount of time and effort. And we still can't say that one can use out of the box existing model and, categorize and clean permit data. Because again, even different abbreviations can mean different things. For example, SF can stand for single family. It can mean square feet or it can mean San Francisco, depending on what jurisdiction you are dealing with. So you do need a lot of context for the input. First of all, we developed schema that fits building permit data universe, because there is no standardized way of categorizing building permits, and every jurisdiction does it differently. We had to start with what should every permit kind of fall under. So we designed what we call a perfect permit. If we were to design a permit and put everything in there that we ever wish for, what would it look like? And basically, we're trying to make every permit that we see kind of flow into that schema. And again, deciding, do you call electrical job utilities? Do you call them subtrades? Or do you call them electrical and then, go under many layers and granularity and get to is it a rewiring? Is it a panel upgrade? So we basically had to design this schema from scratch. And same thing with fire sprinklers, for example. I never knew that there is, so much behind it, but there's wet fire sprinklers and foam and chemical, and there's, PSI and flow regulations and so forth, that it gets very interesting. And also every permit category has its own custom schemas. For solar, you would care about the number of panels and the solar system capacity, while you don't care about those attributes if you're looking at a permit that deals with, like an accessory dwelling unit. There you would say, well, what is the square footage? Is it 2-story or 1-story? What is the roof material? So yeah, we kind of stepped back and said, well, in the perfect world, how it would look like. And then with our data that we have, which is very imperfect, we're trying to massage it and, structure it as perfectly as we can.
Yeah, I can only imagine the, for lack of a better term, mess that all these building permits look like. So Kat, after being entrenched in this building permit world for 5 years now, is there a permit? Is there one permit? Is there 5 permits? What are the permits that have come across your desk and you went, okay, hold on, pump the brakes, everybody. Somebody's messing with me. Did you have any of those? You got any good stuff for us?
I'm glad you asked this question. It's one of my favorites. Yes, we started a list of the most ridiculous permits ever filed. So believe it or not, people file permits for catios. Those are patios for cats, and they can cost anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000. And they are kind of like sunrooms, but enclosed. And I guess they need to be, built up to code and permitted. Of course, I'm wondering how those would be insured. Like, how would an underwriter actually, come up with math behind it? But yeah, catios are out there. One of other ridiculous examples was a homeowner building a helipad on his property. And if you were to guess where in the country it would be, what would be your guess?
That's a good one. My immediate thought was probably I'm thinking middle of nowhere. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking Midwest, middle of nowhere, maybe Ohio. I'm going Ohio on this.
Okay. So it turns out it was in the Hamptons in New York.
It makes sense.
Yeah. Similarly, saw a permit for a wine cellar and fur storage in Los Angeles. And it's okay, wine cellar makes sense. Fur storage in Los Angeles, it doesn't get below 60 degrees. And why would you need an entire storage room for it? How much fur can one have? So there was another one. And then speaking about Midwest, people build falconries. So I've seen permits for accessory building for a falconry. And yeah, same question. How would an underwriter account for that on a policy?
I guess the answer is they wouldn't, unless they had your service to tell them, hey, by the way, John Smith has a specialty storage institution for his wine that lives next to his. So, because that's definitely not on the policy application.
Yeah.
Square feet of wine and fur storage.
Yeah. And speaking of, I guess using permit data for, double checking or ensuring that what's being insured is what truly is on the application. We see permits that indicate that, in a building, there is commercial kitchens. while the occupancy codes say, oh, it's just a retail facility. So there are a lot of use cases where, something gets underwritten with a certain occupancy code and type, and yet it's a completely different risk profile because there's a lot of things that might be happening under the hood. So that's, one of the use cases that we see quite often for permit data.
Yeah, those commercial kitchens, like you touched on the fire suppression systems earlier. Once you put a commercial kitchen in something, it's a totally different ball game.
Yep.
And having that, I could very much see how having that knowledge and having that insight from the data that you guys provide could be extremely beneficial from an underwriting standpoint. In doing a little bit of research about you guys and your company, I saw, and because you can't talk about tech and you can't talk about AI, if you see someone that has bumped into NVIDIA you can't have a conversation about AI and not ask them what that looks like for them. I read something about a program that you guys were working on with NVIDIA or involved with. Walk me through that. How does that look for you guys? And does it give you an advantage? Does it give you a leg up? Does it speed things up for you? Walk me through that. I'm very curious about that.
Absolutely. Yes. So we just got into NVIDIA's Inception program. It is meant for startups in the AI space to help them accelerate any of their models and kind of do knowledge share and have a way in to get quicker knowledge and I guess specs of all the NVIDIA ecosystem. And we're using it specifically their AI stack to improve the speed and accuracy of permit classification models. As we scale, we're dealing with 250 million records today. And specifically, we're extracting structured insights from very unstructured and textual permit data. So yes, it's absolutely invaluable in our experience and gives us a lot of advantage to speed up the models that we're running without NVIDIA's AI stack.
That makes so much sense. In this, things are changing so fast that keeping up with, even daily, keeping up with what's happening becomes a little bit more difficult. Seems like every day. What is next for you guys? What does the next step look like? Or have we mentioned some carriers. Have you guys partnered with any like MGAs, or what is the go-to-market plan look like for you guys moving forward?
Yeah, great question. And it kind of, I guess, ties into your previous question about moving quicker and using latest and greatest AI stack. So from the technical standpoint, we always want to, speed up the level of our predictions and classifications to a level of like daily and, reducing infrastructure latency and improving throughput for large batch scoring across the millions of properties that we have. And on the go-to-market side, we do have commercial agreements with top tier carriers and active pilots with carriers that just understood the value prop right away. Great question about MGAs. Haven't quite explored that world yet. And reinsurers. There's a lot of applications on the reinsurer side as they do portfolio analytics. Might not be specifically single property focused, but like higher level analysis and modeling is super valuable from the permit standpoint. And also uncovering other interesting use cases and applications of this data. We talked about pretty standard, claims processing and underwriting, but recently we decided to do this exploration around data centers, right? So everybody's talking about data center developments, and at the same time, what is happening to single family and residential properties around them? We have this theory that if you are in a close proximity to a data center, there might be a chance that a homeowner would have to replace their HVAC and major electrical systems more frequently because of the micro taps on the grid that come with proximity to data centers. And sure enough, we did a quick study, Loudoun County, Virginia, and found that homes that are within half a mile to a mile proximity to a data center replace their HVACs 18% more frequently. Again, it's not very, science proven yet, but we believe there's something there. And you don't see that information in claims yet. But permit data kind of gives you this view into the future. And we feel that, insurance pricing and underwriting has been done historically based on historical data and claims. But there are things in the world today that didn't exist before that's kind of hard to understand how it's going to change things in 3 to 5 years from now. So I would say, from a technical standpoint and go to market and just from the product development, there's a lot that we're excited about.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I think that's hard. The longer you do something, you guys have been doing it for 5 years, but you get into a new company or a new endeavor and it's really exciting and you're really excited. And there's just this energy, right, that everybody brings to founding a company. How do you keep that as a founder and an innovator? How do you keep that new company? How do you keep that new company feel, right, through the process and through the trudge? Because there's always a little bit of a trudge, right? So how do you keep that going?
There always is. I think for me personally, just having this data background and seeing what can be done with the data that we have just opens up so many doors and so many opportunities and possibilities in the future that every time I look at this data, I think about all the applications and how we can improve underwriting and claims workflows and outcomes and just keep going. Again, like I mentioned, uncovering the novel applications of this data is one thing, but even getting this data to a place where it's easy to understand and use. And I feel like we're just, at the tip of the iceberg there. One of our mentors at the program that we graduated from kind of compared, the health of the buildings similarly to annual checkups. You go to a doctor and there is a certain list of things or markers that they test you on, right? So similar with buildings, every year, there should be kind of a questionnaire or evaluation of the major systems, of the roof, of the structural integrity, of the foundation, and especially given where the property is located. If it's a catastrophe-prone area, there should be even more checks. And I would love to see permit data just being the standard in any insurance process as well as real estate. And, even using this data to prevent things from happening. For example, the collapse of Miami condo that happened in 2020. If you were to look at, the permit history of that building, you would see a lot of things that were not on there that should have been there. So there's also a lot of permit data applications where, we have a baseline for, okay, in this particular area or zip code, we should be seeing, ABCs, like roof of a certain age and system maintenance of a certain cadence. But there are properties that fall under that. So just addressing those and why things are not happening and, addressing those gaps to get those properties up to speed is something that, is not being done today. And then there's also a lot of questions on even property valuations. I know that there isn't a standard underwriting form that accounts for ADUs, for example, and that's, at the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac level. So using permit data and seeing how much of an improvement was added to a certain property and coming up with, federally regulated standards is another thing. So there are, if anything, there's too many use cases and no lack of excitement for us in working with this problem.
That's awesome. It sounds like you guys are really enjoying the work that you do, which is always refreshing to hear. People that love their job and love the industry that they're in. Kat, we are going to start wrapping up. I have one last question for you. Outside of building your a catio immediately, what, if any, advice do you have for other InsureTech entrepreneurs? Is there hey, if somebody would have told me this 5 years ago, it has saved me so much time?
So I hear from a lot of founders how difficult it is to kind of break into the insurance space, how slow of sales cycles can be with large insurance carriers, and how even maybe archaic some systems are. Kind of seeing and comparing insurance to other industries that we've sold data to, it is on the forefront of innovation, believe it or not. And I would say, instead of getting stuck in those very slow sales cycles, just finding one problem that your technology can solve within one department in one company and just pioneering that and running a quick pilot is a super quick win. And then it can spread like fire, meaning with the positive outcomes, different departments talk to each other. So the applications can be found, elsewhere. So I would say, thinking globally, but starting from an experiment and seeing where it leads you. And then just keeping very open mind. When we started Builty, our first idea was not even the data business. It was an ADU marketplace where we would connect homeowners and builders. And look at us today. Like, we are fully into the insurance industry and, getting narrower and deeper. And a piece of advice I was given one time was, if you think you're going very narrow, cut that scope by half or even more and go even narrower. Yeah. Like all the, use cases that I shared in underwriting and claims, we're actually laser focused in on claims these days, and just going deeper and deeper and deeper down that route and learning everything about, FNOL and triage and how desk adjusters work with field adjusters and how special investigation units work. That's a whole new world. And it's definitely like deeper rather than broader and shallower.
Absolutely. Kat, co-founder and CEO at Builty, thank you for giving us your time today. One of your most precious resources. We appreciate it here at the FNO InsureTech Podcast. We always enjoy hearing interesting new InsureTech stories, especially in an industry like you described as slow and archaic. So I completely agree with that description. Thank you for giving us your time today. And we know that you guys are going to do some awesome stuff. We know that you're doing awesome stuff. And I'm really excited to see how this conglomeration of data is really going to help shape the next 5 to 10 years in underwriting, in contracting, in just kind of everything. It's going to be super interesting to see where this takes you guys. So thank you very much for giving us some of your time today.
Thank you so much, David. A pleasure. And yes, great speaking with you. And thank you for amazing questions.
Thanks, Kat. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to the FNO InsureTech Podcast. We just finished with Kat Gordienko, the CEO and co-founder of Builty. She was very generous with her time today. She told us some super interesting stories. I am going to start looking at what it's going to take for me to get a catio added on to the backside of my property, because my cats are in desperate need of their own private patio. So great insights, great company. They're doing some interesting things in the world of building permits and data and InsureTech. And as always, we appreciate the time to get to learn about new products and new technology that's out there. So FNO InsureTech Podcast World, thank you for giving my first solo podcast to listen. You are now part of the club, so I appreciate you as well. And like we say every time, thank you.
The FNO InsureTech Podcast is produced by Alacrity Solutions. Thanks for listening.